It contained, you know, dining rooms, sleeping quarters, libraries, and guess what? They could practice because the DB Tomei was privately owned. So they always were careful not to accept grants or things that would make them have to, you know, be accountable to what the industry was doing. So at this time, now traveling, at this time, after all we've seen, keep in mind that Dr. Sperti is directing 100 scientists at Cincinnati locations, the Palm Beach location, and they have 15 satellite hospitals at colleges with laboratories, all working collectively. So you wonder how he could do it. I've got to touch on his cancer research for a moment. This was his lifelong ambition. When he started, there was no, not only was there no cure, I mean, they didn't even know how it started, but he would wound the light again. He would wound cells with his ultraviolet light and then watch them multiply. And then, of course, you know, we know that then they go on in the bloodstream and the lymph, and then it's other cells, and then they multiply. And he said it was not the outcome that he wanted. He realized how difficult that would be to stop. But so, the cancer is a presentation in itself, but by the end of the 70s, Dr. Sperti and the staff at the Institute were very close to the cure for cancer. They were having remarkable results. Some tumors had been struck by 70%, some had disappeared altogether, with the patients experiencing complete remission. The FDA stepped in, and in a news article written by Dr. Leo Nutini, remember he's doctor's cousin, physician and professor, the problem with the FDA is how the regulations are applied. In relation to cancer therapy, when patients are considered terminal, the FDA is clamping down on our ability to treat them, even though they know they're going to die. Tests on humans before the FDA applied restrictions resulted in remission of cancer in several patients who had no recurrence of a disease. Here's a quote from Dr. Sperti. We must stress the fact that we do not have a cure for deep-seated cancer, but we feel we do have promising leads which should be followed. In other words, let us help the patients we're able to help. Let us at least try. I'll leave the cancer question here, but I know one thing is for sure. If I had cancer, I am following Dr. Sperti's therapy. Now let's also note here that in 1967, the Institute was renamed the St. Thomas Institute, and for the most part, it was now funded by companies set up from Dr. Sperti's inventions, with profits funding the research. Again, he could have been millions and millions and millions, but he gave that money over, and in his later days, they asked if there were any regrets, and he said, not at all. I mean, that was what he wanted to do. So this report seems extensive, and it is, but we have only scratched the surface of the work of the Institute. They worked on everything from guided missiles to roasting coffee and everything in between. The scientists produced an extraordinary amount of work. The Institute held 127 patents. Oh, guys, you're gonna like this. This is Dr. Sperti in 1982. He's featured in Cincinnati Magazine with his ladies all around him. The article was The Amazing Dr. Sperti, and some of his colleagues kidded him at the Institute. They said, hey, Doc, why don't you give us a couple of those girls? And doctors retorted back, get your own girls. So we see a sense of humor there. Okay. On a personal note, Dr. Sperti was a very unpretentious gentleman. He always referred to himself as George Sperti, not Dr. George Sperti. He was affable, but he could be really tough when necessary. Doctor did have a downside. Even doctor, he could not drive very well. Colleagues did not like riding with him. His mind was on research and not on red lights, of which he drove through many. They hung on for dear life. Now, he knew 3 popes personally, and this is Pope Pius XII, but Pope Pius XI appointed him into the Pontifical Academy of Arts and Sciences in 1936 That was an international appointment. There were 70 members total and only 6 Americans. It was a huge honor for Dr. Sperti. He was only 36 years old. So he knew, we just saw Pope Pius XII, and here he is with Pope John the 23rd. So he did know 3 popes personally, and he traveled to Rome many, many times throughout the years. On the display tables are all of his degrees and honors. He had 5 honorary doctorates, and he was the recipient of the Catholic Action Medal in '42 and the Mendel Medal, a prestigious medal, in 1943. Dr. Sperti held 42 patents. So this was his home in Fort Mitchell, somewhere between over the dry cleaner, remember? Somewhere in the late 20s, mid to late 20s, the Spertis built this home. It is gorgeous still today. It's on the corner of Fort Mitchell Avenue and Dixie Highway, and at that time this beautiful trellis garden went with the property. Now it looks like it belongs to the house next door, but at that time it was in the Sperti yard. They probably built it. So that was their beautiful home in Fort Mitchell. This is the beginning of the Sperti farm here in Boone County. He loved this farm so very much, and he really created it himself. This is the lane. Well, let me just tell you, Dr. Sperti brought the old McMillan farm in 1933 from the four-way stop in Burlington. You just turn left, and it's a mile out the East Bend Road, off on the left. They bought this farm as a retreat. It was 1933. The phone was ringing off the hook day and night. They wanted him to answer a question, come and work for them. You know, it must have been very bad because they really wanted to get away. And so they bought this beautiful farm. They fell in love with it, and they moved here permanently in the late 30s. It was about 600 acres of land. They kept acquiring land. There were new parcels coming in. So this is just some pictures of the farm coming up, so I'll try to pay attention here. When we get to the house, Doctor designed this house. He was the, so we give him a new title now, architect. This house is made from stone that was brought up from Gunpowder Creek. It has a really steep hill, and it's 1930s. The farmers are out of work, so they really built this house. And they brought load after load after load of stone. The front of the house, the back of the house was really created first. That was the retreat, and then they put the 2-story on the front, and that's very elegant. And the back here is back sleeping rooms. This house was built for fun, entertainment, their retreat, and for guests, because that large wing there is for sleeping, to stay over. Okay, that's the house. That's how far it goes back. The wing travels very far back, and that would have been the first area of the house. This is the party room. They have a room there. It's a banquet room. It must be the most gorgeous. It's 1,000 square feet. Beautiful pine paneling, the open beam ceiling. That's from timber from the farm. And see this window off here to the side, there would have been a bartender in there. This was the day of elegance. As you can see, the candle holders, and people that worked on the farm said it took weeks to get ready for these parties. They polished the silver, and it was just a lot of undertaking to get ready. And like I said, then the bartender would have been there, probably a hired bartender. It was a very elegant time in history. And they enjoyed. There's Mildred, and Doctor is there, older now. And there's a server, it looks like, coming around.
That's Dr. Nutini's wife.
Right. Oh. Okay. Doctor in the kitchen. And we have to know that Doctor planted. Not only did he line the lane with the beautiful pine trees that almost made a canopy, it was just his fairy tale farm. There's Mildred, of course she's older here. But Doctor always had a vegetable garden. He had grape arbors. He had raspberries, blueberries, which was his favorite crop. And when threatened with an infestation, he got out there and covered them meticulously with cheesecloth to protect it. This is their lake. This is not a very good shot of their lake. We have a prettier shot. This is shot down from the house. Beautiful dog, Father Jansen, one of the Catholic priests that visited often, built the dock. And there was sand laid like a beach, and the local children all came and swam there. This is just a sweeping shot of the farm. Another good shot of the farm. That house has 9 fireplaces and 8 bathrooms at the time of Dr. Sperti. So it was meant for entertainment. This was a working dairy farm. They always had farm managers. Willard Scott and his family, and then Harry Bear and his family ran the farm. And dairy farming is very demanding. You milk morning, you milk night, you do work all in between. And then they had crops too. They had some tobacco and corn, so they had the major crops going. So it was a big undertaking to run this farm. There's another good picture of the barn. Now, he was known for champion cattle and bulls. This is a champion here. Mr. Bear's showing him. And that is a good-looking bull. This, though, is the Grand National All-American Champion. This is Boone County Pat. And we have the silver plate to prove it on our display table. So that, and now Dr. Sperti worked with his light, enriching their food, producing great bone structure and muscle mass. So that's how we've got that silver platter. And that's Mr. Bear. Dr. Sperti liked to ride when he was younger, and he said, I'd rather ride than eat. And of course, there he is on one of these saddle horses. Lots of Boone County, lots of Burlington people would see Dr. Sperti mowing on his tractor. There's a local child with him and his dog, and he said he could really think. Just get out and mow and think. This small house was to the left of the barn, and while the Willard Scotts were in the other stone house, there was a matching stone house that was the farm manager's home. It looked a lot like Dr. Sperti's home. It's down now, though, sadly, because of the Arling House subdivision. Brookwood Fireplaces and all went. So the Bears lived here when the Scotts were in the identical stone house, and this was to the left of the barn. The mouse house. This is the infamous mouse house, but Dr. Sperti built this house especially to raise mice for the experiments, and it had up to 30,000 mice in there at a time, and they were different species and colors to be used for different research experiments. It had to be kept meticulously clean. It was air conditioned so that the research would be clear, and they couldn't have diseased mice. That's peeking in the mouse house. You see the long counter and the sink. Dr. Sperti died on April 29th of 1991. He is buried in St. Mary's Catholic Cemetery in Fort Mitchell. He lies right beside Mildred, as he would have wanted it. Their mother and father are at the beginning of the grave. And so that's where he is. And now we'll just stop right there for